Welcome to the Twilight Show with me, Ben Thomas. On the very first show, I'll be talking to a current head teacher and colleague on the role schools are playing and indeed can play in helping their communities. We'll be discussing the challenges communities up and down the country are facing currently and how educational settings are helping children to make sense of their lives outside of school. All this to come on Tuesday's Twilight Show. Alrighty, good evening. The first thing to to say, as you can probably tell, I'm just recovering from a second bout of COVID, which was absolutely delightful. And I'm here with Louisa Sanguera, who I have had the pleasure of working with for 5 years now, and she's literally right next to me. But also, she's got what I'd class as a slight sniffle. So I had serious COVID for the last couple of days, and Louisa has now decided to jump on that bandwagon and have a slight sniffle. So if the voices break, if we start coughing, all that sort of stuff, then that's kind of the biggest issue that we've got, really. Hopefully you can hear me. Hopefully you're hearing all this as well. Louisa, how are you?
I've got a slight sniffle apparently, but I'm very well. Other than that,
Good. Well, we're kind of, as I said, we have been working together for a long time. Louisa is head of our school. I am a deputy of that school, and I kind of feel like this is the first show that I've done, and I think if you're listening to this first time, you'd want to know who you were listening to. So I've been teaching for 14 years now, all in the primary sector, and I've kind of done every single job going in terms of leading and supporting and teaching and things like that. So I've had what I'd like to think is a really, really good experience. I've worked in a number of different schools, and I kind of got involved in this really because I met Tom at a education thing in Birmingham before Christmas, and we got chatting, and he just said, look, we're looking for people not like me. He didn't say exactly like me, but just kind of having that conversation, and I thought it'd be a good opportunity to get involved and talk about experiences, really. So that's kind of a very, very short short synopsis of where I've been with education. I personally absolutely love the job. It's something that I adore, and I don't say that about many things, to be honest, but it's something that I absolutely love, and it's very, very difficult times at the moment for a lot of public sectors, but also teaching as well. So we're going to talk a little bit about how our school and schools in general are becoming really kind of the focal point of their communities and what they need. So I'm going to kind of ask Louisa to introduce herself a little bit so that you're not sort of talking to a complete stranger and you realise that she's fully qualified to be on this podcast. I'm going to give myself a little bit of a rest. I'm going to drink some, what is this tea? What are we drinking?
It's a green tea matcha.
It's a green tea matcha. It's very nice. So I'm going to hand, I'm not literally going to hand the mic over to her. I'm going to literally let her talk into it, and she's going to share her experiences.
Thank you, Ben. And thank you for having me on your very first show. I'm very excited to be here. So, yeah, as you said, I think it's important that I introduce myself too, so that people listening have got some idea of my background. And I hadn't actually sort of thought about my background in quite a long time and kind of gone back through my teaching career. So it was actually quite a nice exercise to think about where I'd started and how, in a way, I feel like things have almost come full circle from the first school I worked in to where I am now. So I started my teaching career as an NQT in a year 2 class, and the school that I joined was deemed to be failing at the time. And I definitely did not understand what that meant in terms of what my day-to-day teaching would look like and my experience of teaching would be like in that kind of school. Possibly a good thing I didn't realise at the time. So as people will know who've been in that situation, we had very frequent Ofsted inspections. But I worked with, honestly, some of the best staff I've ever worked with in that school, and it was a really diverse community. There were behaviour challenges, but it was great seeing the progress that happened as a result of the consistent care that we gave to those children and the nurturing approach that the school had. A nurture group was set up in my time there, and I absolutely loved being part of that and learning the importance of pastoral care. I quickly became the PSHE lead, and really enjoyed that role. And I can vividly remember the head teacher announcing to us in the staff room when we became what was labelled as a satisfactory school at the time. And she subsequently burst into tears and had to leave the staff room. And it was only at that point, I think, I realised the pressure and the stress that she must have been under, but she'd really kept us, and, particularly me as an NQT, shielded from all that. She's an excellent head. She's still the head there now, actually. I moved on from that school because I relocated, and I was a year one teacher next, and then a reception teacher, early years lead, and I also did my national Senko qualification at the second school I was at too. And I think, being EYFS lead and also being Senko was what really helped me to develop my relationships with parents, which is something that I feel is so, so important, working in a school in any role, but particularly as a head teacher. Learn how to communicate and the importance of communicating well with external agencies and everything else that comes along with being a Senko. While I was in that school, I also went on a specific leadership course for leaders from ethnic minorities and ethnic backgrounds, which I felt quite weird about at the time. I sort of didn't know that things like that existed, and I can remember having quite an odd conversation with the head teacher, sort of asking me if I wanted to go on this course, and kind of her not really knowing how to approach it with me and how to sort of word it. But I can remember feeling very out of my depth on that course, because I was with a lot of very experienced professionals who were deputy heads or head teachers, and I was very much just starting my middle leadership journey at that time. But it did really inspire me. I then relocated again after that, moved abroad and went to teach in a British international school in Spain, which was a completely different community. It was a very big school, 3-form entry from nursery to year 13. And I taught in year 2, and in year 4, I did some supporting across year 7 and 8. Became assistant head of the primary school there, so learned about leading a much larger team. Was part of ISI inspections, learned a lot there about HR, budgets, and all the kind of things that go alongside whole school leadership. And then I moved back to the UK 2018, and got my first head of school role at the school where we're both at now. And yeah, it's my 5th year there as I'm now head teacher. And I'm sure we'll talk more about this as we go on, but it's certainly been a journey. When I became head of school, the Ofsted was due, and then we unfortunately did go into special measures very shortly after that. It was expected that was going to happen, given sort of historic things that had gone on. But obviously we've gone through the journey of that through various monitoring visits at the same time as going through a pandemic and things like that. And when we did eventually get that good outcome, I can remember bursting into tears at that. And it took me right back to what I said right at the beginning of this very long introduction that I'm giving for myself. But about that, the first head teacher I worked for, and seeing that reaction from her. And I think it kind of really took me back to that moment, and kind of had a very different understanding of the role that I'm in now to what I thought it was when I was looking at her all those years back. So yeah, that's my journey so far.
That's you in a nutshell. Yeah, exactly. I think all of that stuff is really, really important, because what I know of you and what I'm getting a sense from, and hopefully people listening are getting a sense from, is that all the communities you worked in are very, very different, but there are are underlying threads there in terms of not just being there for the children, which is what we do as teachers. But we were talking about this kind of at the end of last term, which seems like sort of several months ago now, about the demands that are placed almost accidentally on teachers, on leaders, but also kind of almost from top heavy down to how educational practitioners are dealing with situations and having to deal with situations. And I think the kind of the inspiration for firstly talking about communities on kind of my debut show, which you're listening to now, of course, but also getting Louisa on to talk about that was kind of really, really important, because we're not going to talk a lot about our school really, but there'll be bits that we chip into, and one of the things that we've had to really do is look at how we can serve our community beyond the classroom. And I would say we are working in an area that is probably fairly different to other parts of the UK, but also there will be threads that run through even in kind of little village schools as well. And so kind of the challenges that communities are facing at the moment are, are very, very prominent in how we set up our school, how we engage with our communities and our parents and our children, but also generally across the nation, what kind of school leaders' perspectives are of the things that they're having to deal with and being expected to deal with. So I guess really kind of the first thing we're going to talk about is how schools are currently helping at the moment. What kind of things do you see, Louisa, as a kind of a head teacher, but also as a kind of a lead practitioner in schools, as to what what schools are being asked to do and what kind of schools are dealing with at the moment?
Yeah, so I think in terms of community, one of the big challenges really is kind of where and what is the centre of the community now, and where and what is the heart of the community. Because if there is no centre to a community and we don't know what that centre is, then what is it that people can connect to?
And I guess by accident it becomes the school, right?
Exactly. And I think there are so many places within communities that used to very much be the centre. So you'd have, your community centres, your youth clubs, your pubs, places of worship, those kinds of things. And, lots of those things are closing down now, or are in kind of states where people don't really feel very proud of them. Many communities don't have sort of single places like that anymore that everybody would go to. There are different places of worship, different people attending different things. And the one thing that everybody in the close-knit community will all attend at some point is the school. And then in addition to that, we've got the fact that we're still coming out of this pandemic, or going back into it, I don't know, repercussions of that. Plus, obviously, the cost of living crisis. So I think all of those things are challenges at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, I think the cost of living crisis is the biggest thing. And, what you kind of seeing before is that people that were just about getting by before this kind of hit, I guess, is that the right word? I don't know. Like an economic tsunami or something like that. It's one of those where people that were just about managing are no longer doing that. And that's, it's very, very keenly felt in terms of education, in terms of having children that are prepared for school, have all the equipment that they need. So there's a lot of things there really, and we could do a whole separate podcast about the economic, say, failings, but how schools are potentially mistreated funding wise, and how the children and pupils in particular are affected by that. So there's a lot of things there really. In terms of moving that forward, do you think that there is an expectation on schools to solve all of the problems that families and communities are currently facing at the moment?
I think because people in schools are, we're kind of on the front line of a lot of that, because parents are talking to us every day, children are talking to us every day. It's going to be that we, of course, start thinking about what we can do to help, because nobody will, we're not in that kind of profession where we're just going to sit back and not be supportive and not help. So I'm sure that all schools everywhere are thinking about what they can do. And I know, we're the building that people go to every day, that we see the same people every day. So going back to what I was saying about being the centre and being the heart and creating a sense of belonging and helping people to make social connections, giving children the skills to become future leaders of communities and knowledge and understanding about looking after and caring for the community that they live in, and supporting them to sort of explore all the areas of their community and talk to everybody who is in it. And I think these kinds of things are stuff that I know you and I focus on for our school, but lots of schools focus on doing with their communities. And you can start small and then expand, and there's various kinds of things that go on, but just to sort of give those things as an overview.
Yeah, I mean, I for me, in the, say the short time, but 14, 15 years, whatever it is I've been teaching is a long time. I remember, starting out as an NQT, and, you might be called to talk about a child with SEN in your class. You might have an annual review. You might get involved just a little bit with those situations. But now, you think about, and of course it comes with responsibility, it comes with the levels of leadership, but you think about the amount of people that teachers, just class teachers. I forgot to say, we've got a live cat in the room. So if you can hear squeaking, it's not myself or Louisa, it's the cat who's currently fiddling with my foot at the moment. Hello. In terms of how we interact with those professionals and the kind of demands that are placed physically on our time as well is massive. And it's something we will always do, because obviously it keeps the children safe, and it's bettering them in terms of how they have their life in terms of expectations. But the amount of professionals now that class teachers have to talk to, let alone department heads, assistant heads, anyone connected to a school, is just incredible. And I think that really is a kind of I guess a downside of what's going on economically in the world, in this country, but also how some of that funding has been stripped from local authorities that maybe could have put it in elsewhere. So a lot of it does fall on teachers at the moment to build that community. I think in terms of you as a leader, do you feel like even being a head teacher for 4 years, do you think it's shifted even in that time?
Yeah, definitely. And I think going through the pandemic has been a huge part of that, because what was noticed across the country is that when schools closed, when there was that point where they completely closed, it wasn't just education that children didn't get. There was so much else that children and their families didn't then get as a result of that. Even just very basic things like the routine of walking to the same place every day and seeing the same people who they could kind of share problems with, celebrate things with, and to feel that kind of sense of belonging, because you're seeing those people every day and talking with them every day, and that feeling that they understand you and you understand them, and you're part of something. And I think not having that physical building to go to every day and feel part of, and those groups of people to connect with, doesn't take very long to not have that before people can start to feel really quite disconnected from their community.
Yeah, I think that kind of connect is really key. And I think we were talking about this earlier, in preparation for this podcast, about how the social elements of children in some respects in school have kind of improved. And I know that might go against the kind of the national picture and maybe the kind of the popular narrative that's coming out of teaching at the moment. But certainly from our point of view, it's very difficult to explain as a tangible thing. But there's almost a kind of a sense of relief that the children are back in school and they're kind of getting FaceTime with their teacher physically every day, and they're seeing their peers interacting. As you said, that was kind of, it was one of the main things that was missing from from the pandemic, really. We're gonna hear from one of our sponsors now, actually, and then we'll be right back with you to carry on this debut podcast with me, Ben Thomas.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, a leading publisher of books, directories, educational guides and magazines specifically aimed at forward-thinking schools in the UK and beyond. Have you checked out their latest releases? Don't miss out! Visit johncattbookshop.com to explore their full range of titles and advance your own professional development today. Happy reading!
Happy reading indeed. And talking of being happy, it's such a difficult word to contextualise and kind of wrestle with, isn't it? Because there's almost an expectation on every stakeholder to be happy all the time. We're going to kind of focus back on the pandemic a little bit and kind of go back to some of the issues that families faced during that time. What kind of residual impact do you think those kind of mid-pandemic issues have had on certainly on not just our pupils, but nationally in terms of a national picture, but also how families are dealing with situations right now?
I mean, if I think back to sort of when the restrictions and things like that were in place and schools wanting to keep that feeling of community going, I know that one thing that lots of schools did was provide some kind of remote learning for children. And I think this very quickly sort of became remote learning for families in a lot of ways. And I know at our school we were doing some wellbeing groups and things like that with some of the children. And what was fantastic was how many of the children actually got their parents involved to be part of doing the cooking that we were talking about, or making the collages, or making special boxes with memories in and things like that. And I think it was through that where we started to realise actually we can do so much more than provide just for the children. We can do things for the parents as well and the adults to make them feel connected and part of their community too.
I think that's the key, isn't it? And that's sorry, coughing again. I don't know if I told everyone, but I had COVID very recently. I tested negative yesterday, so I'm back in the game today. But the voice is still not quite there. So that's why I'm drinking green. Is it green matcha tea?
Green matcha tea.
Green matcha tea. Yeah, exactly. Thank you. Kind of that involvement of parents has always been really, really important. And kind of in my experiences, and I'm sure other teachers and educators listen to this as well, you can't have a successful relationship without the buy-in from the parents and the carers that obviously trust you every day with their children. But one of the key things that I feel, and I think will continue to improve, is how parents are interacting with schools. Do you feel like since the pandemic and since things have kind of moved forward a bit, do you feel like that's improved? Or do you think it's probably a bit of a wide-reaching statement because everyone's got different issues with their schools? But generally, do you think in our communities and other schools that we speak to, do you feel that that's improved?
I think it's certainly helped everybody to realise that we're all human, and I think it's meant that people have been much more open with each other and much more authentic with each other. And I certainly feel that parents in our community are very, very open with us now about things that are going on in their lives and where they need support, and asking for help or sharing things, or letting us know of things going on that might be helpful for school. And I think that's certainly come about through going through a time where we've all felt so vulnerable together, it's kind of pulled people closer and brought out the best in everybody. And, you know, I know everybody is just so keen to help each other and support. And I think that kind of newfound sense of openness and authenticity between schools and families can only be a positive thing.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, it's very, very difficult, isn't it? Because as that age-old thing about, you know, you understand the parent or carer, you understand the child, you know, you work together as a team. And certainly I feel that there has been a change that's very difficult to describe in terms of how parents see school, and you know, we're the kind of constant when maybe other things in their life haven't been, and how, you know, they're reacting to school has generally improved. And I feel like a lot of the issues in teaching now aren't around how parents react or carers react. It's more a kind of a, you know, an establishment point of view, which, you know, is not for this podcast really at the moment. But it's really interesting that you know, you mentioned about, you know, having that trust and kind of moving it forward, and you know, the school is a physical building, of course, but there were a lot of things within the pandemic that they lacked, and actually when school came back, they had those things again, and it is someone to talk to. And, you know, we always have to be very careful as educators where to draw the line in terms of how much we can actually solve or help them with in terms of those problems. What, apart from the obvious, what do you think at the moment is limiting the help that schools can give to communities? And by obvious, I mean, you know, money, which is a root of everything, right?
I mean, yeah, it's resources really, and obviously, money is a big resource, a big part of resources, but it's also people and it's also time, because you need both of. You need money, people, and time. You need more of all of those things to be able to give better support. And it's, you know, there's always more and more that we think of as educators and that we want to do, but for everything that you start doing, there's a finite amount of time, and so something then needs to go, and it's finding that balance. And I think one of the most important things in terms of serving your community and giving your community what they need is to really get to know your community. You know, go out and meet the people that work in the local cafes, in the shops, meet your police community support officers, local MPs, you know, the people that sweep the streets locally and things like that. It's so important to get to know them, so that with the finite resources that you do have, you can put those to best use.
I mean, we have those community partners in our school, and they're invaluable for us. You know, they really are absolutely vital to what we do, and they're a range of professions, they're a range of jobs, but you know what they're able to give the children by giving them kind of very little in terms of money and time and everything else is just fantastic. And we are, you know, certainly in our school, we're very, very grateful. And I know, looking at kind of education publications, social media, that other schools are doing that as well. You know, they're looking to branch out to people and establishments in the community to be able to kind of to raise the aspirations of the children, not just what they're giving them in the classroom, but also, you know, what they're providing them kind of outside of school, really, which is really, really important. Do you feel, kind of, you know, another fairly big question for you, do you feel restricted in what you are able to offer our children, not from an education point of view, because that's separate, you know, that's a kind of a school running issue, but do you feel there's more that you would want to give our children, and I say our children because obviously we do work together, within the community, and experiences that you'd want to give them?
I would love to, and it goes back to, you know, what I said right at the beginning about early on in my career realising the importance of pastoral care. And there is so much more that I'd like to be able to offer to our children and families, and to our local community as well. And I think that, like, if I could, you know, I've discussed with you before about, in an ideal world, if we waved a magic wand and things, what could schools look like? And I always talk about this 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. wraparound care, free for all children. And I'm not saying that flippantly. I know that there are a number of reasons why that would be very, very difficult, and a lot of things would need to change. But in terms of supporting working parents and being able to provide all of that extra pastoral care and raising aspirations and that kind of thing, you've got these huge buildings, really amazing buildings, some of them that are open for a certain number of hours a day, but for a lot of the time, sitting empty. And actually they're an amazing resource. And I know there are places that do wonderful things and make great use of their school buildings, but certainly not everywhere. And again, it just comes back to those limited resources that we've talked about. But definitely, I think there's so much more that could be offered.
And do you think what's stopping that at the moment is, and I'm talking here, I'm moving away from our school, I'm talking more generally in terms of education. Do you feel that what's limiting that is kind of time on community, let's say citizens' parts? Do you think it's down to money? Do you think it's down to a lack of vision? Or do you think, and this is not a loaded question, do you think it's down to education generally and kind of society around education not really understanding the kind of the real world and what problems, I say our children, but the children in the United Kingdom at the moment are facing?
Yeah, I think we talk a lot about what makes a brilliant school in the community, and I think communities thrive and are their best when everyone can be authentic and be their best version, which I talk about a lot.
Sure.
And have a voice and feel connected, which is sort of what we started talking about at the beginning of this podcast. And I think really that we need to start looking at success of schools and success in education as being something that's much more holistic than just the academic. And I know schools do that already in a lot of ways with their pastoral curriculum and extracurricular activities and those kind of things. But I'm thinking so much more wider than that, which would obviously be completely changing the role of schools in some ways. But, things at the moment, there is so much that is not working. I mean, in the world as a whole, there's so much that's not working. But let's stick with education and schools at the moment. And I think, we want our young people to be their best versions, and that's a massive part of our school values and things. And we want everyone in society to be their best version. And in order for that to happen, the community around people needs to reinforce those healthy behaviours. And yes, there are some young people who have a community around them, a family around them, that do reinforce incredibly healthy behaviours. But in the world that we're in now, in the society that we're in now, there are a lot of young people that don't have that as their immediate family. And so that needs to be community. And I think, I was at a yoga festival, completely going off on a different tangent over the summer, and there was an excellent speaker at one of them, and a line that she said that really stuck with me was, we don't need globalization right now, what we need is localization. And that really stuck with me, because I think, we do need to focus locally on our small communities, making those really, really strong and making those really, really supportive for people. Why not have a massive rethink of the role that schools play in doing that?
On that very profound note, we're going to go to news, and then we're going to come back and talk about some of those successes and some of the things that schools can continue to do to kind of drive being the central point of the community, really. So we're going to be right back with you after the news segment. Don't go anywhere.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, a leading publisher of books, directories, educational guides and magazines specifically aimed at forward-thinking schools in the UK and beyond. Have you checked out their latest releases? Don't miss out! Visit johncattbookshop.com to explore their full range of titles and advance your own professional development today. Happy reading!
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and this is Teachers Talk Radio News.
With the majority of pupils returning to schools this week, the new year has brought new announcements and new challenges for many in the education sector. Government advice about illness and staying away from education settings if you're sick was shared, and the issue of strikes remains a hot topic. Pressures on school leaders continue, with The Guardian reporting that many head teachers are broken, at risk of heart attacks and exhausted as a result of the erosion of services for children and families, meaning the burden of support is falling on the shoulders of schools too often. So, as the new year begins on a duller note than any of us might like, here are the top stories that have caught the eye of Teachers Talk Radio News this week. In Manchester, the Morning Star reports that students at one of the city's universities have launched a rent strike. Students at the University of Manchester are using the strike to press their demands for an end to what they describe as extortionate rents and their requests for a 30% cash rebate. Organisers say that more than 30 students per day are joining the protest, spurred by the combined effects of the cost of living crisis and poor quality accommodation provided at too high a cost. According to the National Union of Students, half of England's students are facing financial difficulty, with 3/4 of these saying they expect this to have an impact on their studies. A previous rent strike in Manchester in 2021 was successful, and students hope to replicate this outcome in this new wave of action. FE Week reports on Ofqual's decision to disband its committee of experts who advise on exam standards in favour of a more flexible approach on policy advice. The Standards Advisory Group has been active for more than a decade and was set up to help the exam watchdog maintain standards. Ofqual confirmed that the committee will be replaced to reflect a broader remit, such as expansions in vocational and technical qualifications and apprenticeships. Ofqual has faced criticism and upheaval over decisions and communication during the pandemic. Deputy Chief Regulator Michael Hanton described the change as positive and will secure quality and fairness for all those who take and use qualifications. Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, who recently announced his ambition to have all young people study maths to the age of 18, has faced a barrage of criticism about his plan. The I newspaper reports that Robin Walker, chair of the Commons Education Select Committee, feels that the PM should be focusing more on the early years sector to boost education levels instead. He calls the maths plan highly challenging, citing the nationwide shortage of subject specialists as the biggest barrier. Mr Walker, Conservative MP for Worcester and a former Education Minister, highlighted issues around recruitment and retention, as people with maths qualifications are quite employable elsewhere, so it is a highly competitive market when it comes to drawing people into teaching. He added that focus on the early years sector would be the most effective way of supporting children, describing it as embarrassing that England's childcare system is rated so poorly when compared to other countries. The AI also carries news of the decision by Catherine Birbalsingh to step down from her role as social mobility czar. Ms Birbalsingh, once dubbed Britain's strictest head teacher, has made the surprise announcement because she believes she comes with too much baggage, going on to say that her propensity to voice opinions that are considered controversial puts the Commission in jeopardy. Ms Birbalsingh wrote of her decision in a column in Schools Week. A controversial figure for many, but with an equally vociferous fan base, Ms Birbalsingh also commented that she felt the role of social mobility czar meant that she was becoming a politician, but that this was not a skill set she wished to develop. Finally, ITV News reports on how parts of a Turkish Airlines plane have been delivered to a school in Alveston, South Gloucestershire, to be turned into a new library. The project, named Flying High by pupils, will see parts of the plane turned into a new outdoor reading area. Full details can be found on the ITV website, with artist impressions of the final project showing children and adults enjoying the new space. This has been your Teachers Talk Radio News with Jo Fox.
This is 2 Minute Tech with Steve Woods, your tech briefing on Teachers Talk Radio.
Hello! Did you know I've been doing this show for a year now? Well, if you didn't, now you do, so shower me in gifts and love. I'm kidding. But there is one person or group of people I want you to think about as this term draws to a close. Your tech support. They may, in your mind, be the people that say no to a lot of stuff. They may stop pupils playing games and stop a lot of the web getting into your classroom. But they keep you, your data, and your network safe. This week, as some of us are off, and others are desperate to be, roll on Wednesday, spare a thought for your techie. They'll be coming in over the break to patch and update. They'll be taking those broken machines and making them work again. These people, who in most schools are like ghosts, if Charles Dickens had had the privilege of tech support, they'd have been the spirits of modern day make do and mend. They wouldn't be draped in chains and padlocks, but come bearing an endless acceptable use policy. As you wind down, or if you have already, a thank you to your tech support will make your new year that little bit easier. Remember, next time you use tech in your lessons, everything is working because of them. As always, I'd love to hear what you want to know about tech. Let us know at TTR 2022. I'm Steve Woods, and that was 2 Minute Tech. Have a lovely break.
2 Minute Tech with Steve Woods, your tech briefing on Teachers Talk Radio.
Alrighty, we are back live on the Twilight Show with me, Ben Thomas. If you just joined the show, where have you been? First of all, you've missed a good 42 minutes and 3 seconds now of the show already. I'm recovering from COVID, or rather I have recovered from COVID from a test point of view, but my voice is still on the way out, so that's why I kind of sound like I've been gargling gravel more than I usually have. Just listen to the news there, Louisa. We listened to Bible Sing, or we listened to the comment about Bible Sing, and you pulled a bit of a face. What are your views on what's gone on there?
I mean, you know how I feel about talking about this kind of thing too much before I've read reams and reams of information about things. You do know that about me, don't you?
Yeah.
I don't like to give comments and thoughts on things unless I have studied them inside out, and I certainly have not studied her inside out or that particular news article as such, but I don't. It's just kind of another change in a very public figure stepping down from something and kind of giving up a bit before anything has really got going. Which just, you know, maybe it's the right thing, maybe it's not the right thing, but it's just lack of consistency again. And you cannot, you know, how can we build people's trust and that connectedness and, you know, all these kinds of things we've been talking about on this podcast, sense of belonging and that, when there are just constantly people changing in positions all the time.
I think that's the key, isn't it? I've not really followed in terms of what she's been up to. Really, it's not, you know, everyone's got their own views and everyone moves in different ways. But certainly, what I've read is kind of very very different to how I would expect a school to run. You know, I'm a parent myself, so it's not a kind of school that I'd want my own children to go to. But you know, look, everyone's got a right to their opinion, and it's one of those things where she's made the decision and she moves on. But it's an interesting one where we have, you know, education and kind of politics, and they've always been linked. But I don't ever think the boundaries have been more blurred than they ever have, really. We're gonna link back to something you said before I played the news about success, and you know, you talked about, you know, the wraparound care idea, which is a great idea. I'm sure people that make decisions would balk at that from a financial point of view, but from a well-being and from the whole child perspective, which is what education is really has moved to in the last sort of 5 years. Certainly, I feel. What for you, what would success look like in terms of community support across the board in education? What kind of things would you go, yeah, do you know what, actually that's a great initiative from the powers that be? What kind of stuff would you be looking at and going, put this in place?
I think it's quite tricky to sort of say a blanket, this is what I would do, or this is what success would look like, because I think success in a lot of ways, if we're talking about holistic approach to looking at success, would be very different for individual schools and individual communities. And I think, I would, if I had that power, if I was the woman in charge, I would do what any new head teacher would do really when going into a school, which is that you listen a lot. You spend a lot of time listening to all stakeholders, to all the different staff in your school, to all of the people around you. And I know, we use a tool in our school that's a tool used within the social care system too, called the 3 houses tool, and very simple and very effective. But house of bad things, house of good things, and house of dreams. What would you have in each of those things? And it's a really effective tool to get people thinking, provides a good framework structure for talk and discussion, gives people something to go with rather than just a blank starting point. But certainly listening, learning from your community, and then building that sense of trust. I think going back to what I was saying in terms of your earlier question, in order to change things and to be successful, so a huge part of success is having people in those leadership roles that people trust and that people feel are going to listen to them. And once you've built that sense of trust, you then got to show people that you are acting on the advice that they've given. And very simple things of, you said this, and so we've done this. You told me this, and so I've done this. And even in terms of just very small things initially, but I think in terms of sort of saying a blanket, what that would look like, that's quite tricky. I think for me, it's more about actually really working out what the best thing would be to do for individual communities, individual schools, and then, giving them more autonomy to do that perhaps than they have currently, which in turn would probably mean releasing certain accountability that's currently in place. I mean, it's a big job, and it would take a very, very long time, but it needs to be done, because as I've said, as things are at the moment, there's just so much that's just not working.
I mean, I'm smiling here because that was my next question, because I used the word blanket and I instantly thought, no, she's, I say she, Louise is going to bat this back, which she did.
It's almost like we worked together.
Yeah, I know. And then, you kind of mentioned the autonomy thing, which could be my next question in terms of do you think, which was a stupid question because I knew what your answer was going to be, do you think schools should be given more autonomy? So we're agreed on that. We're aligned with that. We know that. In your opinion, then, as someone who is a school leader, who is a head teacher, who has, a lot of responsibilities, a lot of things juggling, what, in an ideal world, someone said to you, all right, Miss Sangera, head of your school, we're going to give you autonomy to be able to put community projects in place. What would that look like to you?
And I'll go back to what I said about having a holistic approach to education, and something that I'm very passionate about myself is health.
This is why we're drinking this tea.
This is partly why we're drinking this tea, and why I'm sitting as far away from you as possible currently. But yeah, if you don't have your health, and I'm talking your physical health, your mental health, if you don't have those things, you don't have anything really. You know, I don't want to sound massively dramatic.
No, I get
but
it.
It's so important to keep yourself healthy in all respects. And we're living in a world at the moment where so many people in the world are not as healthy as they could be. And I don't think enough time is given to the importance of teaching that in schools, because there are so many other things that we need to teach, and like I've said before, if you introduce something, you've got to let something go, unless we continue to extend the school day. But I just think that teaching children and families the importance of living a healthy lifestyle would then have such a huge impact on them individually, but also on society as a whole. And so many of the long-term problems that we've got going on currently, and, you know, the NHS is in crisis and things like that. And, you know, just the importance of a good diet, your diet, you know, what you're putting into your body, that's your fuel.
And I think, you know, just to jump in there, that's the real frustration. And a bit of context for you, we've kind of moved away from, you know, those kind of themed weeks a little bit, because we recognise as a leadership team that actually this stuff has got to be underpinned in your school ethos, your school culture, your school movements. It's no good going for a week, right, you know, you've got to eat vegetables, you've got to eat fruit, you got to get fresh air and all the rest of it. This stuff's got to be ingrained in our young people from very, very early on. And teachers, whether it's right or wrong, have got to lead on that if those young people are not getting that from home, and in terms of role modelling. So, you know, we've moved away from that kind of element of those theme weeks, which you know, were effectively tick box exercises, certainly when I started all those years ago. So, you know, that's really important, really. You know, in terms of what else you were saying, do you think then that if schools were given that autonomy, that there would be an even kind of greater shift away from the services that still exist locally? Do you feel like the accountability would increase on, you know, school leaders and then filter down, or do you think it would just kind of be part and parcel of the job, basically?
It's tricky to say, really. I think, you know, it depends how much autonomy was given, and that would come from, I guess, how much trust was put into those leaders, because you're not going to give people autonomy unless there is that trust, and that's where you need, you know, consistent leadership and people starting something and finishing it. But I'm sorry, I've forgotten what your question was, but I'm really sorry.
In terms of it. The amount of times you do this is just appalling. It really is.
I know.
Who do I speak to about this? How do I escalate this?
I'm too used to not listening to you. It's really hard having
to. Horrendous thing to say on my debut show, because it is my debut show. I was just, you know, in terms of accountability, from if, you know, schools were given that autonomy, do you think the accountability would increase? Do you think then that there would almost be like a separate scrutiny element to, okay, we've given you this autonomy to work within the community and improve, you know, without being dramatic, life expectations, life aspirations away from the classroom? Do you think that would be, with that autonomy, do you think there would become, you know, a kind of almost like a tag on to, well, hold on a minute, we've said you've got to do this, so we've got to monitor it in this way?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for refreshing my memory.
Honestly.
I know, I'm awful. Yes, I mean, I think if there was going to be you know, that level of autonomy, yes, accountability would have to increase. But I think that accountability would be coming from different people, or a different body to where it comes from now. And I think the accountability really would be coming more from the community. If you're getting that autonomy and they're putting that trust into you, more of the accountability, I guess, would come from the parents, the families, the partners that you're working with to provide the education and the approach that you're giving. So yes, absolutely, there should be accountability. You don't want people just doing whatever, but the accountability should be coming from the people that it directly affects.
I mean, my concern with that is that schools are almost, I say accidentally, that's wrong, because you use the key phrase about listening and, going in and just kind of observing and just hearing about the things that people want to improve on, and kind of issues that are relevant to communities and schools within those communities, for sure. But my concern would be that someone would go, okay, well, we're going to give you this autonomy, but we're also going to tell you how to do it. And that goes back to what we were talking about in terms of a blanket approach, which just wouldn't be appropriate for this. And I guess really, and the bigger picture with education and teaching is that there's almost an expectation that schools get on with this, but with no budget, no real kind of support, which, to some extent schools don't need if they're working within the communities, but kind of outreach programs have stopped. Other local services have stopped within the council and local government as well. And it becomes very, very difficult to kind of drive some of the changes that schools want to see. So, we're talking hypothetically here at the moment. Of course we are, because we do this every day. A lot of schools, people listening will do this every day within their settings. But actually, there needs to be a very serious conversation very, very soon about the importance of schools, not just from an academic setting, but from a kind of, how are you helping? We hear all the time about schools setting up their own food banks. It's something that we've obviously heavily talked about as well, which is something that we want to do long term at our school. But the idea that schools are becoming more and more the central focus to their communities and being pillars of kind of safety for a lot of these people is so important. And I think we're, as a society, we're a million miles away from having that kind of mentality embedded across the board. So it's, there's a lot of work to do. And I think this is where schools networking in terms of what they do within their community is so important, whether you're part of a MAT, whether you're part of a local, borough, whether you're, completely independent, whatever it is just reaching out and having that conversation with schools about the issues that your communities are facing and how you can kind of pool resources in a lot of respects. I suppose really, the final thing that I would ask you on this topic would be, do you think the government recognise at the moment that schools are integral to communities? Yes or no?
You have to put yes or no in the end. No.
Okay. In your opinion, what do you think they could do to improve their understanding of how important schools are in communities?
Take action that shows they value schools. For example, in terms of physical school buildings, and that this is something very close to my heart. But school buildings are where a number of adults are spending their entire working day, and a number of children are, getting their education every single day. And so many of those adults and children are doing that in buildings that I think a lot of people in government would not want to sit in every day and be in every day. And I'm sure that a lot of people listening to this will have had that experience in school buildings themselves.
I think that's the key, isn't it? It's what we always say to to our leadership team, and someone very, very wise taught me in my very first teaching job when I was on Q2 is that the best way to understand what's going on in school is just get out and take the temperature, and you walk around and you see what's going on, and that's why we've largely done away with formal lesson observations in our school, because you can walk into a class, start the day, you know how the day's going to go. If you're looking at a lesson, you walk in for 5 minutes, you take the temperature, you know what's going on. Happy days. But I think that's really the kind of the simmering frustration with a lot of people in education, is that people calling the shots and making these decisions don't know, the conditions that communities are in, don't know the condition that some of the physical school buildings are in, don't know about the lack of resources really. And I think, what you said there is absolutely bang on in terms of understanding these problems a lot more and having a little bit more empathy around that. And, it's not it's not going to go away. It's suddenly not going to there's not going to be, a non-cost of living crisis. Stuff is not going to get better instantly. It's going to be, I feel, quite a difficult year. And long term, schools are going to need to be given, I feel, and I'm sure you hopefully feel the same as well, that schools will potentially go in and kind of, improve their offering in terms of how they're working in communities, really. We're going to go to a message from one of our sponsors, and then we will be right back.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, a leading publisher of books, directories, educational guides and magazines specifically aimed at forward-thinking schools in the UK and beyond. Have you checked out their latest releases? Don't miss out! Visit johncattbookshop.com to explore their full range of titles and advance your own professional development today. Happy reading!
We're back, by the way, we're back live. You're with me on the Tuesday Twilight Show. I'm Ben Thomas. I'm joined by Louisa Sanguera, who
Hello.
is currently sat next to me. We finished our matcha tea, green tea.
Are you a convert?
Yeah, it's all right. Yeah, it's okay. And the cat's chilled out, which is good. Well, no, actually, I've just said that and he's moving now. He's rolling over. It's funny, isn't it? Teachers love cats. I've got two of my own, and they're absolutely brilliant. And this little chap, Rocco, is he's a black fluffy thing, and he's got beautiful eyes, and he's currently trying to, I don't know what he's doing actually. He's just yawning and trying to be aggressive, but it's not working. You talked a little bit about yoga earlier, didn't you? You kind of dropped that in about.
I didn't mean to. I
going to a yoga festival. And we've been talking about communities and kind of what goes on there. You do something quite cool with our school building, don't you? And kind of what you've been doing with our children. Do you want to talk a little bit about that now? Actually, I haven't got a choice because it's my show. You've got to talk about it now. So.
Oh, I'm still getting used to taking your direction, Ben Thomas. In terms of yoga, I'm guessing you're talking about, because obviously there's a lot of cool stuff I do with our building.
Yeah, we'll go
so
with
it's hard to choose.
We'll go with the yoga festival and what you've been doing with the kids and our carers and parents and stuff.
Yeah, so I'm a qualified yoga teacher as well. And I came into yoga through, various personal experiences that I've had, but it really, really helped me in a lot of ways. And I think as a teacher, and all of us as teachers, when you come across something and you can see what a difference it makes, you just want to share it with other people, no matter what it is, because it's in our blood as teachers and practitioners. And I just really wanted to share yoga with our community because of the benefits that I can see that it has. And I wanted to do it in a way that was accessible to our community as well, in terms of it not costing them anything or a huge amount to be able to access, and to feel like it was something that was open and available to them. And yes, I've taught some yoga through PE sessions at school with a lot of the children, which they've absolutely loved. And I think, they've had perhaps one view of what it is and realised actually it's something very different, and there are so many different limbs to it. And there are obviously the postures and everything that you do on the mat, but it's so much more than that in terms of the values and the discipline that it instills. And then, I didn't just want that to be something for the children to experience. I wanted the local community to have that chance too, and parents. And so, I do offer that to our local community one evening a week. And it's brilliant. It's fantastic. I've met some great people through doing that. We've had some brilliant people into our school building through doing that who didn't know we were there otherwise, and made wider links into the community and help people meet each other and form social interactions that they perhaps wouldn't have done otherwise. So was that what you were wanting?
Yeah, well, I just think it's proof that it doesn't need a lot of money. Yoga is and I'm a yoga convert, to be honest. It's I really noticed an improvement in my overall kind of say flexibility, but my overall health and kind of how it makes you feel and the attention involved. But it doesn't. It's one of those things that doesn't need loads of equipment. It's not like you're playing football or tennis where you've got to go out and buy kit and football boots and rackets and stuff. It can be done. Can be done on the floor. Obviously, it can be done with a very simple, straightforward, cheap mat. And I think, certainly from my point of view, seeing our pupils and listening to you talk about the kind of people that have been attending those community sessions in our school building has been fantastic. Really, that kind of engagement level is what we drive, and that's really, really important. And I know obviously it's a passion of yours and something that you love and you get a lot out of as well. So yeah, it's good stuff, really. Kind of away from teaching, and I know that yoga is obviously something that you do a lot of. Is do the right word? Do you do yoga? Practice yoga. Okay, you practice yoga. What kind of other stuff do you do to, as a leader, keep you grounded, keep you healthy, keep you in the building most days? That sort of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I've spoken already about how important I think it is for everybody to take the best care of their own health as they can. And for me, in the role I do, it's really important for me to look after myself so that I can look after everybody else. I know it sounds, a little bit cheesy in some ways, but it's so true, because if, I'm walking around telling everyone that I want them to be their best version, but if I'm not my best version, I can't role model that and be authentic about that and expect them to be theirs. So yeah, I do, I spend time doing things that I hope are going to make me feel my best and be able to do my best for the community that I serve. I love being outside, apart from in the lovely rainy weather that we've been having recently.
Yeah,
I do still try and get out in it, but I like to be outside. I like going running, I like walking, I like being in nature. Anything outdoors. I like, I love the beach. Don't live near a beach, obviously, but I love being in those sort of wide expanse outdoor spaces. I just find that very, very grounding, and it just helps me to kind of think about what my own values are and stick with my values and not kind of get off track and caught up in comparing what I'm doing to what other people are doing, and just keeps me very focused on myself. So I love all of that. I love to read. I've got books all over my house, in all the different rooms in my house, and I love, I like to read fiction, but I also read a lot of non-fiction around sort of teaching and learning and leadership, health, fitness, diet. Sleep is something that it's very hard to get enough of, but the older I get, the more I read about and know firsthand how important it is to get enough sleep and look after myself. I watch a bit of series and Netflix and things like that every now and again, but I do find that books keep my attention a lot more than watching something on a screen does. If I'm reading a book, I can't do anything else at the same time. True. And I do very much like being present. I mean, you hear me say to you all the time that I hate multitasking, and I don't believe anybody can multitask well.
I'm really good at multitasking.
No, you're not. Nobody is.
But just going back to, so again, like really good examples of stuff that you value. So I in this, episode, as you've been listening to, I am going to keep referring back to real life experiences and what we're doing currently in our school, because I think that's really important, because there's no point me coming on here and going, oh yeah, communities this, communities that, if I don't give you practical examples of what we've been doing and aiming to do as a school moving forward. And I'm not out here saying that we get it right, because we don't, we obviously make mistakes, but one of the things that Louisa identified, and it sounds really, really obvious, but sleep is such a big thing, and sleep routines are such a massive part of childhood, but also as an adult as well. And we've got a fantastic family worker, we've got a fantastic Senko, and they kind of created a kind of a sleep workshop for parents. Not where they came in and said you're just going to go to sleep, but
we
kind of
do that.
We should do that, actually, like a mood room. That'd be wicked, like a sensory room, but for parents, that'd be cool. But kind of like getting those routines in place are so important for our young people and our pupils, because we know as adults pushing 40, dare I even say it, pushing 40,
dare you,
talking to you, not me, is that sleep is really vital. And if we don't share that with our young people and our students, how are they going to know if they're not given those expectations? If there's a problem at home, in terms of setting those expectations and those routines, that's what we've tried to do that. Same with reading, set up a parent book swap where they can take books every Friday and stuff like that. So all these little things kind of feed into that, that mentality of trying to help the community, not just from a kind of, this is how we teach maths, this is the expectations for the end of year 6 or year 2, or, reception baselines and so on, just about the kind of holistic approach and the whole child, which, is something that in our school we've always tried to value, really.
Sorry, Charles. I'm interrupting you on your own. It's happened. It's happened. I waited 1 hour and 11 minutes before I interrupted you.
And 4 seconds.
It's a record. It's an absolute record. I've forgotten what. No, I haven't. I was going to say I forgot what I was going to say. Just because you sort of picked up on what I said about values there, and I think, kind of going back to what we were saying about heart of the community and the values of your community, I have always said that it's really important for us as staff in schools to really know what our values are and to be authentic about that and share that with our children and with our families. And I come back to my own values every so often with the children in school, and I always say to them my 3 core values are kindness, compassion, and curiosity. And I talk about how I came to sort of have those 3 things as my values, and what the actions are that I try to do every day to make sure that I'm living by those values. And I think it's so important for the values that you have as a school to kind of then seep out into your local community, so that it's almost, the community's values reflect the school's values reflect the community, and it is, it is one whole community together, the heart.
Yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right. And you can't have one without the other, can you, really? So it's important that there's always that collaboration. Going back to you reading, what are you reading at the moment? What book are you looking at?
What am I reading at the moment? That is a very good. I've always got more than one book on the go.
It's madness.
So I've got various books on the go. I'm actually rereading a book. You looked at me then as though, why on earth would someone
anyone read
a book more than once? Yeah. I'm reading a book which is called Think Like a Monk.
Okay.
By a guy called Jay Shetty. Big fan of his podcasts. I think he's absolutely fantastic. But he spent some time living as a monk in a monastery in India. He doesn't anymore, but his book Think Like a Monk is absolutely fantastic in terms of, value setting and what I've just been talking about, and being your authentic self. And grounding yourself. And I mean, there's just all sorts of stuff in there that I come back to fairly regularly, actually. But kind of this time of year, I often like to revisit books that have had a big impact on me, just to kind of read the same text and think about whether it affects me in the same way as it did a year ago. So yeah, I'm rereading that at the moment. Sorry, the cat's being noisy again.
The cat is being noisy. He's banging the door. Well, I'm reading almost the complete opposite book. So we have these conversations in school with our adults, and just to kind of get a bit of background on what they're doing. And I'm reading the autobiography of a guy called Drew McIntyre, who is a professional wrestler, and he was, or is currently, he's not the champion at the moment, but he was the first British champion in WWE, which phenomenal achievement. But I like reading about people and their experiences, because it there's always something that you can take from a geeky point of view in terms of bringing it back to teaching, and obstacles and work ethic and experiences that you can always kind of share with your pupils and stuff like that. So that's kind of what I'm reading at the moment. But it's it's interesting that you kind of are able to read lots of different books. Do you do that with TV series as well? Are you able to?
No, I always read lots of different books. The thing is, I listen to lots of podcasts where they have people who've written books as guests, and then that person mentions their book, and then I have to buy that book and start reading it immediately. Basically, yeah. But I'm also reading a book called The Hidden Life of Trees at the moment, which is totally different. You're sort of trying not to laugh now, aren't you?
I just did that face I always pull really when you say something that I think might be ridiculous.
But no, it's. I mean, there was a whole part of it about how it used to be thought that trees and plants were kind of like fighting for attention. And to get the sort of the most light and get all the best kind of nutrients and things, but actually they work together as communities and they support each other, and they can even let each other know if there's danger through kind of things happening through the roots and things like that. It's very, very interesting. I've only just started it, which is
what's it called?
The Hidden Life of Trees.
Okay.
But so I have lots of different genres going on. You asked me about series, though, whether I watch more than one series at a time. No, I don't usually. I'm currently watching The Morning Show with Jennifer Aniston and Reese Witherspoon. Really enjoying that.
I'm watching a program called The Rig on Amazon Prime. I've said it anyway. It's out there. It's really good, actually. Whoa, the cat is going crazy right now. He is running around like a panther. So again, it's kind of one of those things where I've been in my role as a deputy head for officially for like 1 year or coming up for 1 year, but actually I've had the kind of role in different iterations for probably 3 or 4 years really. Call it different things, but kind of the principle is the same. And I every time I look at stuff, I look at how, if there's leaders in it, I look at how they behave and the kind of stuff that they do to be able to look after and kind of celebrate and respect and appreciate the people around them. And The Rig is a really good example of that. So if you're not checked it out yet, it's on Amazon Prime. It's really, really good. It's got some cracking characters in it. A lot of people, if you go online, have absolutely panned it. But personally, for me, it's escapism, drawn into it. The leadership of the people in the program, the characters in the program, absolutely fantastic. And if you watch Game of Thrones, there's probably about 4 or 5 people, actors and actresses, that were in it as well. So there's kind of a quite nice link there, really. It just about sort of brings us to the end of this podcast. Before I do that, we've got quite a few things on Teacher Talk Radio at the moment. We've got Tom, founder and leader and kind of the main guy at Teacher Talk Radio. He did a podcast yesterday on ChatGTP. So I don't know if you've kind of heard of that. Well, I mean, you would have done unless you've been living under a rock. And the impact that will have on teaching. If you can still hear me, you're doing really well, because the cat has found a piece of tinfoil maybe, and he's just charging around. Look, have the pencil. So yeah, so Tom came out with this podcast yesterday. A lot of people listen to it. A lot of traction on social media. I'm going to listen to it tomorrow. I haven't had a chance yet because I was kind of preparing for my own podcast, because I'm incredibly selfish. But that's available to download and listen back to now, in terms of ChatGTP and the impact on education. So a lot of good stuff there. We've got Jane tomorrow morning. She's on the morning break at 11 o'clock, and she's preparing future teachers for CLIL. So that's going to be quite interesting. So preparing future teachers for CLIL. Harry is up tomorrow on the Twilight Show, 6 p.m. He's talking about greener classrooms, which I think is so important at the moment.
Amazing.
Like really, really important. It probably links back to your Secret Life of Trees potentially. But again, being green and kind of having that eco focus is a bit more of a driver now for schools, and should be more of a driver. And I think, young people are much more acutely aware of what needs to happen to be able to say rescue the planet. Is that the right phrase? But something along those lines in terms of being able to, being able to kind of celebrate being greener and kind of caring for the planet a little bit more. So that's Harry at 6 p.m. tomorrow. Dr. Poppy Gibson, who I know sort of reasonably well, done a few projects with her. I have to call her Dr. Poppy Gibson because she doesn't like Poppy, because she'll get all funny. So we'll call her official title. She's on at 11 o'clock on Friday morning, and she's talking to Ian Wigston, the author. So that'll be quite an interesting one in terms of having are authors celebrities? I don't know. Will they?
I don't know.
I suppose they are in their own right, aren't they, really? Anyone who writes a book...
That's a whole other podcast. How do you define celebrity?
What is a celebrity? The cult of celebrity in teaching. Maybe that'll be the next one. Who knows? Talking of celebrities, I've had my very own local celebrity, Louisa Sanghera. Thank you so much for joining me on this this debut podcast, actually. The first one we tried to do, we did it at school, and I quickly realised that the firewall setting wouldn't let me go live, which was hilariously awkward but also incredibly frustrating. So I'm really pleased that kind of Christmas is out of the way, New Year's out of the way, and we can hopefully get back into routine with this one. So it's been really, really good to have you on the show. Have you enjoyed it?
I have. Thank you so much for having me. It's fair, I've not done anything like this before, so it has been very enjoyable, and thank you so much for having me on, and hopefully I will be invited back in the future and we can talk about something different.
Well, there's a lot to talk about in education at the moment. If you follow me or you have me on Twitter particularly and LinkedIn, I put a video up just before I caught COVID, actually, weirdly, about how difficult it is at the moment in teaching, and as I said at the top of the show, for me it's not a calling, because that's a really archaic view, but it's all I've ever done from a family of teachers. And I personally, I've never been happier in terms of going into school every day and stuff like that. So, it's a job that I'm incredibly grateful for. But, I'm acutely aware that the issues that face profession at the moment are massive, and hopefully together we can move those forward. Thank you so much for listening. I will be back in 2 weeks' time, 2 weeks from today, which is like the 20-something of January, with another guest talking about an element of education on the Twilight Show at 6 p.m. on Tuesday. Thank you so much for listening. Until next time, take care.
You've been listening to Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live and listen back at ttradio.org. We look forward to hearing from you next time on Teachers Talk Radio.